The United States Navy is central to our national security. For over 200 years, the Navy has protected our shores and our sea lanes of communication from attack. Our Navy has also stood in the gap for our friends and allies in time of war and conflict. From the British and the Barbary pirates in the 19th century, 2 world wars, and a long Cold War with the former USSR in the 20th century, now, in the 21st century, the Navy is faced with a series of hybrid threats emanating with a range of weapons from state-sponsored single low-cost drones to state-based multi-domain precision warfare systems that are AI-enabled and networked from the seabed to space. Hi, my name is Ptolemy Pruden. I'm an advocate for national security and warfare, and this all started when I was a little boy. I would study foreign affairs and weapon systems from the Duke University Library. I would learn every source that I could. I would talk to senior citizens about their experience in World War II, Vietnam War, and that just inspired me more and more. And through those years, I developed the ability to understand and evaluate foreign affairs and weapon systems, and that's where I am now. National security is very important because it allows us to contain and maintain our way of life. Now, our nation has grown from where it was in the past to where it is today. We finished with the global war on terror. We have finished dealing with those different types of constrictors that we had before the 21st century. Now, we're in a new type of war where we have a hybrid warfare going on. We are dealing with China that is growing incrementally every year. They have 350 ships currently. We have 292, and those numbers are projected to go down to 287 in the next 2 or 3 years. How do we, as Americans, how do we work with our friends and allies globally for them to feel comfortable and for our own American citizens to feel comfortable knowing that we can stand up to global challenges and we're prepared and equipped for it? My goal through the Common Sense Defense platform is to educate everyday Americans about what they can do to make a difference with our national security, what they can do to help our nation become stronger. Everyone has a part and a place that they can take to do more to help our nation. We have to, as a nation, the whole of nation, play their part to make sure that our nation's strong. It's a type of asymmetrical warfare, meaning it's a little bit of economics, it's a little bit of policy, it's a little bit of industry, it's a little bit of education. Everyone has a part they can play to make sure that our nation is strong. I often think of the young people who protested in Hong Kong. In 2019, hundreds of thousands of students from Hong Kong, ages 20, 25, and workers also in the same age bracket were protesting in the streets of Hong Kong against the Hong Kong government and the extradition law that China was posing on them. These students fought in protest for weeks on end, sharing their voices and spreading their hope that they would be free in the future. Today, those voices, they're silent, hidden from the light of freedom, where China's dark veil of oppression and totalitarianism is a rule of day. So every citizen, every Gen Zer, every parent who has a child who is a Gen Zer, everyone has a part to play to make sure that our nation stays strong. And that is what we're trying to do with Common Sense Defense. We're trying to distill the national security playing field so that you can understand the part that you can play to help us stay safe. Thank you so very much, and thank you for your time.
Ptolemy, when did you first realize China was a threat?
I first realized China was a threat pretty much about 8 years ago when I was studying about China's military growth and about how China was spending more of their money modernizing their military. And I think it was right at the height of the global war on terror where everyone else's attention was on just the global war on terror and how we were fighting against terrorism. And one of the unique things that China started doing when they started building islands in the South China Sea. Building islands would be where you dredge up dirt and you pack it down and you make an island, which is small, you make it larger. And China was doing that, and they were putting runways on the islands for fighters and bombers and ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capability. They're building up their islands so they could have control over that part of the South China Sea. They built 6, 7 islands, and at the time I was teaching a class dealing with geopolitics, and I was telling the class, hey, let's pay attention to what China is doing here, and that was really kind of the genesis of my paying more attention to China and their expansion, and that was about 2014, 2015. We have 6 kids, and we have 5 boys and a little girl. And nothing actually impacts your heart more is when, back in the old days, we had to go to the post office for your children to sign up for a selective service. And the most important thing out of that is that we all want our children to serve in the military if they're called upon. But the onus is also on us as parents to make sure that we have wonderful or strong national defense policy, because when you have strong defense policy, it allows you to provide a deterrent to your enemies. And so that's why I personally am playing more of a part in the future, is because I want us to have good, solid, common sense defense policy so that we don't go to war. And the way that you don't go to war is peace through strength, but also using common sense so that we can make sure that we don't go to war with China in the future.
And it's very important for parents to also engage with their congressmen. I worked for the United States Senate back in the early 90s. When his constituents called in and they talked to him, or they gave their opinion about a law that he was potentially passing, he really listened to that. And so everyday Americans do have an impact on their congressmen. And so we have to utilize that. And I don't think that very many people realize that they have a bigger voice than what they may be displaying right now, and especially when it comes down to our kids. I know when we had to take our kids to the post office and they signed basically like a potential draft, it really opened my eyes. I had 3 sons that could potentially go to war if necessary. And I don't mind them going to war, but I want our policymakers to make wise decisions, not prideful decisions, not decisions based upon their own understanding that's not backed by common sense. So I think that's very important.
Come to meet Ptolemy Pruden. Last year when we were planning this, Mark told me I need to get a guest speaker. Right? The survey said that we want somebody else to speak other than just the Navy folks and the NAVC and me or Mark speaking. So he said, what about Admiral Fogo? Right? Retired 4-star, stood up the Maritime Operations Center for Navy League there in Arlington, Crystal City. Arlington, I get them confused, right? Very well-known speaker. I had him on the hook. And then a conflict occurred. And they bowed out. I'm running around, so I reached back out to his executive assistant. I said, who do you recommend? They said, well, there's this up-and-coming defense policy expert, Ptolemy Pruden. Maybe you should give him a call. Maybe he'll come out to San Diego and speak for you. So Ptolemy and I struck up a conversation, and it seems like we become my best friend. But anyway, so we brought in our own maritime policy expert, Ptolemy Pruden, and his wife, lovely wife, came to San Diego and is coming to close out the meeting for us with the topic on, I think, chapter 13 of his book, International Collaboration. Come on, Ptolemy, come on up.
Thank you very much, Andy. I appreciate you immensely. You can't operate in life without having friends and people that you get a chance to meet. Like Andy, he's a cutting edge guy. And also the whole team here has been absolutely cutting edge. And I appreciate this opportunity. Everyone has like a superpower, a gift, an ability to stand out amongst the crowd because of their specialty and the expertise. And I think Andy clearly is one of those guys. You talk to him, he's all over the country, crisscrossing the world, trying to find the best product for his international clients. We appreciate Andy for that. And I also want to appreciate the staff here from the International. We appreciate you all being here. It's been great meeting you and hanging out with you this week. So it's been wonderful. I had a chance to talk to Admiral there for about an hour this weekend now, so it was very refreshing. Well, let's get started. So I'm a civilian, as you guys know, and the beautiful part about being a civilian is that you are able to float into a lot of different areas. So my specialty is I work with defense policy, which I do a lot of work with Capitol Hill, and I spoke this summer at the National Defense Industrial Association, and that was a total blast. And then speaking here with defense professionals such as yourself. So what I do with is an organization called Common Sense Defense Podcast, and it's going to be a platform soon. And what we do is we get everyday Americans ramped up so that they can support you, the warfighter, so they can find a spot, whether it's in the policy area, whether it's in national defense industry or the end user, how can they help? And so that's what we do, is we help people to find their niche so that they can support our national security. Okay. There we go. So what I want to do is the introduction. We're going to go through that. Then I'll go through a threat assessment, which are inputs that inform the PRC's planners. Then we're going to talk about drone and ballistic missile attacks disruptors. We're going to go through lethality, international collaboration, moving fires forward, and then finally the conclusion. So introduction about myself. My wife, Tasha, we've been married for 29 years, 1 month, and that's been a blast. She wanted 8 kids. We ended up with 6 kids. So needless to say, I have 5 sons and a daughter, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in our national defense, because I've got some sons, and I want good quality in defense policy so that we can stay clear of that. That's my kids there. Is David, Calvin, Logan, Sky, Aiden, and Paxton. And David is graduated from Wheaton College, and he's going to be working at a law firm, and we'll be looking at going to law school next year. 2 kids in college. The rest are in private school, and we're moving forward from there. It's been a blast. So introduction to common sense defense. So that platform I discussed earlier, if you have family members, because everyone has different types of constrictors, but your family doesn't, if you want them learning about national security and being more of a support for you at home and understanding the world that you're in, that's what we do. We talk to people who are interested in national security, and we expand their capabilities and understandings, and we help them to help you, the warfighters. The reason why I wrote the common sense, the reason why I wrote China Rising: The Case for Containment was because about 2014, I was teaching a geopolitical class, and our students were, every week we would look at the islands that the PRC or plan was building in the South China Sea, and they would ask questions, and I'd be looking at that, and I ended up really kind of spending more time on that, and I wrote an article on the issue, and then I came back and started saying, I think I need to write a book about this, and so we started looking at it. Initially, I was comparing it with the mistakes that Imperial Japan made going into World War II, and I was going to compare and contrast what the PRC was doing now as far as expanding its territory and gaining capabilities. But I started just really focusing on what was happening with the PRC, and then from there I just started really delving into that. One of the unique things that I saw in delving into that is that, you remember when we watch Star Trek, and they would say the Borg resistance is futile. You remember that? Well, maybe not. But so for some people, the resistance is futile. It's like you look at the people, whether they're the Uyghurs, and how they use that platform there and took those people in, and there's 2.5 million people in prison, whether it is Mongolia or whether it's Hong Kong, and the different parts of the sphere of influence there, you see a natural progression. And so as China started taking over the East China Sea and then started claiming the South China Sea from 2012, 2014 forward, then we started seeing a pattern happen that now we're still dealing with the repercussions of that. So the PRC was in a pattern of bringing in new leadership. every 10 years. They have a new leader. And so what happened when Xi Jinping came into power, as you know, he basically hijacked that process. So we were in a lot better relationship with China for 25 years. But what ended up happening, because the leadership was hijacked and he took over that leadership, now we're starting dealing with just his policies. So really we're dealing with the policies of just one basic person and the people around him who are substantiating his operations. And so that's why we're now in this tense tug of war with the trajectory of the plan and the United States Navy. That's why we're dealing with what we're dealing with. I want to look real quick. Yes, let me look at that. That's the book. You guys can get that. If you want to get a case, we'll send it back to you for sure. Okay, so I want to look at some of the threat assessment data. When we look at the Ukraine war, as you all know, we start seeing an intense amount of fusion of top technology and capabilities. We're looking at drone fusion with if you have dual drones, one sights a target or repeats the data, and then one is attacking. That is a unique technological trend that we're starting to see over the last year or two, and that will be the norm. You'll start seeing a bunch of FPV, first-person view drones. You'll start seeing that as being the norm. How does that impact the Navy? Because when you have an array, an electronic array, an ESA radar, you only need a 25-pound explosion to kind of disrupt it or make it a mission kill for that platform. So the ability to do counter drone operations is really, really, really incredibly important for us from an attacking perspective for our enemies, and also for defense for our platforms, so we can understand that. So what you start to see is massed munitions attacks. That's cruise missiles, drones, and missiles coming in onto targets. And it's that ability to fuse those the timings of the range, the timing sequence. That's what we're going to be dealing with more. That will be the norm, like what we saw with the Carney, intercepting missiles and drones and surface platforms. When you start to see that kind of iteration, that's going to be the norm, and those are going to be the types of things that we're going to be dealing with our Navy moving forward, and we have to be prepared for those things. We look at Red Sea attacks. That is a most important thing, are the missiles. So when you bring in drones, you've got to defeat that platform coming in, but when you see those drones and combined with cruise missiles and combined with other platforms, you only need to get to a certain number, then you can get at a point, as you guys know, it's called Winchester, where you don't have any more weapons. So what do you do then? So the key is understanding that's going to be coming your way and doing something about that beforehand. So they're looking at microwaves, looking at high energy lasers, or different types of things that we're looking at that we can do. But that is a very critical component that we're going to have to be looking at in the next few years. I'll talk in a second about JADC2, or the PRC's version of JADC2. So looking at the Iranian attack on Israel, I don't look at that attack because it was successful. What I look at is the attack that they did in Iraq on our air base. When that attack occurred, there were 12 to 14 high impact 1-ton explosions across the airport, and we had over 100 service people with brain trauma, and so they were not killed, but there was brain trauma. So that will be the norm, is those types of attacks. We talk about the attacks on Guam or the attacks on or any of our bases in the Indo-Pac area. You're looking at 12 or 25 or different layers of attacks being able to inflict a massive amount of damage on the surface. And so when you layer those attacks and they all hit at one time, then you're talking about the total a concussive ability where you can incapacitate all of your sailors and soldiers there. That also is the same type of attacks that we're dealing with if we have ships at port. So the attack that Iran did that was thwarted, that's what you want. The attack that happened on the base in Iraq is what you don't want. So we have to plan for that. That was a ballistic missile attack, but if you were to use that with drones and you use that with cruise missiles, then you can see how that can actually cause lots of problems for us down the road. Let's look really quick at the threats that we're going to get from the PRC moving forward. So there's technological advances, or AI. Now we use the Joint All-Domain Command and Control, the CJADC2. So they have their multi-domain strike capability. It's an AI platform that they are developing that is just like ours. So when you fuse the satellite capability that China has put up over the last 4 years or 5 years, you merge that with their mobile and their static ISR capabilities across the South China Sea. Well, what they're going to do is fuse those different platforms together, and you put AI back. So what ends up happening is when they coordinate an attack against our ships or aircraft or bases, they'll be attacking simultaneously, and the timing can be such that it can thwart our ability to defend ourselves, which is why we developed the multi-domain, the distributed capability. So I want to look at real quick. I want to talk to you about a threat that we have. There's a threat that we have that most people are not paying attention to. When you layer the PRC's ability to layer attacks and coordinate those attacks, then you're saying, well, what options do we have? So we have options over the long term. Yes, you can do maritime distributed operations. Yes, you can increase lethality. But the thing that we can do the most is work together with our friends and allies. And so what we have with friends and allies, it's a wonderful thing when you can talk and network together and share resources and share capabilities and share the infrastructure. So that's why this particular environment is so important, is because we're in this together. No one wants war, no one wants conflict, but a good deterrence is the way that you are able to prevent yourself from going into war. And that's what we're trying to talk through. So a couple of unknowns. The PRC is developing quantum technology. They're developing AI systems, as I just stated. They're also, as you all know, cyber warfare is high on the list. And the fusion of all these capabilities, those are things that we're really not aware of. And we have to iterate quicker. And I want to encourage everyone, you need young guns, meaning some kids who are 25 and 35 in that zone, and you need to put them in a room and say, hey, how would you fix this? And I think that would be one of our most secretive weapons that we could use, is getting young thinkers on some of these problems and empower them to come up with some solutions. That was just a thought that I wanted to share. So let's look, there's a component that we need to address, and that is the threat matrix as it relates to the PRC's attacking Taiwan. So there are three that I want to share. One is really simple. It's post 2032. It can happen anytime past 2032. That's when they have two carrier battle groups of 003 platforms, full aircraft systems, missiles, and that could be where they'll be very comfortable having that plus their land capability. The second iteration, the second level of a possible attack is when 2026. That would be 1 year before the 2027 version that Xi Jinping gave his people the go time, right? We've all been talking about 2027. That is the most, that's a very popular one. But here's one that everyone is not discussing, and that is our most vulnerable, and I personally feel that is the most probable. If it's ever going to happen, this would be the window. That is 6 months after the middle of November of this year, 2024. When we're in a presidential transition, that is a time where our nation is the most vulnerable. And because of that vulnerability, because decisions have to be made if Taiwan were attacked, if we had to defend them, decisions have to be made. Do you not know it takes about 4.5 to 5 months to get the security clearance and to get the checks and to get all the certifications that you need, confirmations for national security staff? So in that window, that's where we're the most vulnerable. So if they were ever gonna try to do something silly like that, that would be the window. And the question is, are we ready? Are we prepared as a group of people? Are we prepared for that? And so that's the type of things that I look at. It's like, what can we do in that situation? Are we prepared? Is the Navy prepared? Is the Air Force prepared? And so what are some of the things that we can do to thwart that? One of the things that we can do, first of all, is to triple the number of submarines that we have deployed in the Indo-Pacific, more so in the Western Pacific. That's a very logical thing. The second thing is, have you guys heard of the Mark 70 Typhoon surface, Mark 70, anybody heard of the Mark 70? 1, 10, 15, 20. Okay, so the Mark 70 is a containerized version of a 40-foot version of the Mark 41 VLS. And you can put it on the back of a truck, you can put it on the back of a deck, and it will be able to launch 4 SM-6s or Tomahawk missiles, or you can layer for self-defense of your platforms, and you can put in ESSMs, Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, and those can be guided off board with E-2D or F-35Bs. And also, you can put the PAC-3 missile, the Army's PAC-3 missile in there. That ability to bring point defense will be critical for us in the first hours of any war, any conflict, because currently our maritime our ships do not have any self-defense capability, at least against missiles or hypersonics or aircraft or drones. And so if you were to load we were to load a Mark 70 with 16 missiles of PAC-3 or what have you, you'll be able to extract your surface vehicles that are auxiliaries or amphibs out of an area until you are able to regroup. And so these are the types of things that we have to look at to move forward. That is a normal thing. Massed attack, unmanned surface vehicles, that's what we're familiar with, but there are a lot of iterative examples of that as it relates to different platforms. There's some that are unmanned, that are underwater, that are just under the surface. Then there's some that are, as you know, that work on the surface, and then there's submarine versions. That's the norm, combined attacks. But for us, that's where we're headed as far as an ability to project power and to help our friends and allies. So we're going to be doing that, providing those capabilities down the road. The only example, the reason why I use a Shaheed is because it's cheap and it is effective in a sense, but we can replicate those platforms for our friends. Like if you were to create your version of the Shaheed missile, if you were, let's say you were Taiwan, that you're dealing with that needs to be indigenous, that ability. So what we can do as our friends and allies is provide the ability to replicate 5, 10, 15,000, 20,000 platforms that are simply made. And I look through the industry in Taipei and things like that they could use what they had indigenously. And that's what we have to do, is we have to help our friends around the world be able to maximize their own individual capabilities to make weapons that are line of sight, that are just 2 or 3 miles away or 5,000 miles, and make that capability there so that they can have more options to defend themselves. Okay, so take low tech and add autonomous recognition technology, and then you change the dynamic. Autonomous targeting recognition is where you can take a picture of anything and say, this is what I want you to hit. And when you merge those advanced technologies with a low-cost production capability, then all of a sudden you are able to make your missile or drone, you can launch it. It's not even going to be fire and forget. It's just fire and it'll do its own thing. It's no longer, that's not going to be the way that we normally do business for targeting. That's going to be different. It's going to be go search out this direction, go 10 miles or 50 miles, do a search and look. And it will be GPS jam proof. It would be autonomous. And so not only do we need to make those types of platforms, we have to understand that those types of platforms are headed our way, but also if you were to put any type of the bridge, and for me, the example is the bridge of a ship, Type 55 bridge, and you make the target either the AESA radar or the bridge or any part of the ship, and you're sending 15 or 20 to one spot, one of those are going to get through. So that's the dynamic. It doesn't have to get two-way communication. It's just point and shoot. So when you have multiple platforms that are indigenously made, then it gives you the defender has the advantage. And so in this particular case, when you can do that indigenously and you put enough money on that, use some of the chips that you have that are so voluminous there, and use those platforms, and all of a sudden you're in a situation when you can you have a defense platform that's just crazy effective. This offers an asymmetric advantage via digital engineering, and I think that when we develop, the replicator, which is a CCA or there's like different iterations of the replicator. That's that example that you can have a low cost platform, put high tech on it, and then you scale it out. That becomes a targeting mess for someone who you're going to war with. And so that's why the replicator program has been such a big deal over the last 2 years, is because it's really going to help us. And so for me, moving fires forward is how do I get replicators and CCAs closer to the forward edge of the battle area, closer to the front. Moving those fires forward, that's where you have the lethality that you need. Okay. So, yep, we just went through that. The ISR targeting, saturation attack, bomb damage, assault assessments. Okay, I want to talk collaboratively real quick. The Boeing and the ATS, the air teaming system with Australia, about 2021, they worked together to form that platform. At the time, it was the air teaming system. Now it's the MQ-28. It's called the Ghost Bat, if I'm accurate. And you can mix off the front. And this is not a public service announcement. I'm just kind of talking about how they collaborated. But so you take off the nose cone, and you create a new platform, whether it's ISR or you can do strike. But that's an example of teaming. And that's what we have to do with our friends and allies so that we can get the teaming pieces in place so that we can maximize our collective ability, our collective defense. The security of the Philippines is the security of the United States. The security of Australia is the security of the United States. We have to help our friends and allies get more capability. One of the things that I can do as being a civilian is push for investment in foreign countries, push for investment for foreign direct investment or NGO investment for education, all of those different types of things that you can do for a country to get them to the next level. Like we have to get the GDP for the Philippines from $350 billion to $700 billion. What we can do as Americans, that's my thing. I push everyday American citizens, well, you want to help our nation? Well, let's help get our friends and allies more revenue, more GDP. Okay, so digital engineering, all those different types of advanced technologies that you can use to work to collaboratively with our friends and allies helps us to produce munitions and weapons cheaper and more effectively. Okay, manned-unmanned designs. So there's nothing wrong with working with manned-unmanned designs. You have to see that that's absolutely the future, that ability to do that. Okay, so let's look real quick at the Indo-Pacific Defensive Zone. Consider working with bases in Palau, bases in Kwajalein Atoll, all of our friends and allies who was interested, that you're having a zone that's filled with manned and unmanned platforms being refueled. Manned and unmanned platforms, or should I say more precise, it's really going to be unmanned. You have an area that is infused with autonomous platforms that can be refueled from anybody's location. I'm able to take off, I can land in Philippines, I can go from Philippines to India. Each one of those countries has a zone or area that says, hey, and we're going to work together, we're part of a team, you can land your aircraft here or your drone here. The Indo-Pacific Defensive Zone says the drone from any one of our friends and allies can take off and land, and they have free course to go from Djibouti all the way over to Tokyo or what have you. The key is you're providing an ability so that we can layer our ISR capabilities and our networking capabilities so that we can get a bigger bang for our buck and share data collaboratively with our friends and allies. Now, in a peaceful arrangement, it shows you where there should not be at any point where we don't know exactly where all of an adversary's ships are, sonar matches, where there should be no reason why we don't have access to understand where all of sonar contacts are within a region. But it's sharing data, it's pooling data so that everyone has transparency in that. And then when an unfortunate time may happen where we have to have a conflict, then we share data for targeting. If you put the system that I just articulated to you about AI-based targeting with exactly knowing where an adversary is, then guess what? That ship is not going to be there anymore. Then you leverage your mass munition attacks along with your friends and allies' ISR capability to make that a very lethal weapon. No one's going to want to go to war when they're going to lose 100 and 200 ships in 3 days. So that's how the Indo-Pacific Defensive Zone works. That's how we have to leverage our capabilities with our friends and allies to be successful. I think that I do want to say a word about the precision strike missile and the Mark 70. So the Navy's version of the Mark 70, they work with the Army. The Army also has a precision strike missile, which has increment 2, has a range of about 400 miles. It's a ballistic. That comes online in the next year. It's active now. They produced it. But we have to get beyond how this is just the Navy's platform. This is just the Army's platform. This has got to be, we are the world. We got to be working together here, right? And so it's time for kind of the rivalry is going to have to stop. It's going to be like, hey, dude, what do you need? Hey, what do you need? And so the Navy has to work with the Army. The Army has to work with the Marines. The Marines have to work with the Space Force and Air Force. So that's where we have to go. And then we all have to work with our friends and allies so that we can help everyone be where they need to be. And so the precision strike missile is the next missile up that can also operate off the deck of a ship as well as the XB-70. And the last thing I want to say is HIMARS. The HIMARS platform, the HIMARS platform, we have lots of the HIMARS launchers, but what type of missile are you placing on there? You can place extended range guided MRLS missile, and that now they have 6,000 missiles. They're going to be online this year. That has a maritime strike ability. Okay, so that just happened, and so the key is if you want to provide ability to get strike, you can use the Marines HIMARS, which they've moved over to a different platform. You can use the Marines HIMARS system and load up the new anti-ship missile capabilities. So those are the types of things we want to look at: is how do we work with our friends and allies to help you become strong? How do we work with each other and not fight amongst ourselves and let our weapons platform systems be more of an advantage to us, and so that we can provide a bigger deterrent. The last thing I would like to say is if we had to go to conflict in the next 6 months or 9 months, we need to be thinking, like, what are my plans? What are our ideas? And one of those is what I'm pushing for is $2.5 billion. When I talked to the guys in DC, which I was just there a few weeks ago, they asked me to come there. How do we get more money to the NAVC budget? That has been my biggest thing, is getting $3 to $5 billion more to the NAVC budget. There are people who want to help. Trust me, there are senators and there are congressmen who want to help with our operations and want to help so they can just be, so they can be a part. So I just want to encourage you to let you know that we're all working together, and we want to make sure that we are family, friends, and we're successful. Thank you so very much.